Greetings, Patrick here. Have Cheetah Will View, and welcome to Dollar Theater. So we are trying something rather ambitious for the next 3 weeks. We are going to be covering a TV show that ran for 3 seasons, and we're going to talk about each season every Monday. And the show that we're going to talk about today for the next 3 weeks is Land of the Lost. That was created by Sid and Marty Krofft, David Gerrold, and Arnold Pufnstuf. As this came out in 1974, it ran for 3 seasons, 43 episodes. It starred Wesley Eure, Kathy Coleman, Spencer Millington, who just passed away about 10 days ago, and Rick Harper as Uncle Jack. So we're going to talk about each season. I'm going to talk a little bit about the background of the seasons, and then some of the shows, and some of the themes. A lot of people, myself included, I remember watching this in the 70s. I don't really remember watching it. I just remember the dinosaurs. But I do remember it always as being considered a kid's show. I gotta tell you, this was no mere kid show. There's some heavy shit in this series in the first 2 seasons, including even a couple of curse words that got in there in the 70s, early 70s. Sid and Marty Krofft got their starts as puppeteers in Canada. They did a lot of puppet shows there, and then they slowly evolved to start producing their own content. They started off with live action in the beginning of the 70s. They did a show called The Bugaloos in the 1970, Lisville 1971, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters 73 to 75, Land of the Lost ran for 3 years, from 74 to 76. The Lost Saucer only ran 1 season, as Electra Woman and Dino Girl did, and then the last show was Wonderbug 76 to 78. And of course, everybody remembers the infamous H&R Pufnstuf that came out in. They developed They developed the puppets for the Banana Splits. They helped design the characters and the sets, and of course, and then there's H.R. Pufnstuf. H&R Pufnstuf trivia only ran 17 episodes. 17. And it's still talked about today. Land of the Lost came out in 1974, as I said. And the basic story is a family, the Marshalls, Rick, the dad, and then you had Holly, played by Kathy Coleman, and then you had Will, played by Wesley Eure. They tried to make Wesley into a teen star right away in the introductions of the show by just having his name as just one word, Wesley, and then Kathy, and then of course Spencer. So the premise of the show is the family's on an outing. Their dad is the Marshalls are originally from Indiana. They went on an expedition in the Grand Canyon and got caught in this falls and got tossed over. And it says that they fell 1,000 feet below. But we'll talk about that. Well, anyway, the family falls, and then they wake up, and they're in this mysterious land, and there's dinosaurs. And we see the dinosaurs. This is in the intro. We see the dinosaurs. There's one Tyrannosaurus Rex that seems to love to hang out with around their house, called High Bluff. There's an Allosaurus that is there. They call the Tyrannosaurus Rex Grumpy. They call it a Brontosaurus Spot. And the various dinosaurs have names, including one Allosaurus. Now, what makes Land of the Lost really, really different is who worked on the show. Who worked on the show? Like I said, it started off with David Gerrold, who helped write and form some of the early stories. The first season that included the debut episode that aired on September 7th, 1974. And so, we introduced to the Marshall family. They've been there for a little bit, and then we see them making contact with a prehistoric tribe. Well, three members of a tribe, and that is how we meet this character named Chaka. And so Chaka can't speak English. They can't speak his language, but they get along. Chaka and his two companions. No one knows how anybody ever got into the land of the lost. The Marshalls came down on a raft. Other people are there, what they call in the land of the lost, but they don't really know how they got there or how long they've been there. They can only guesstimate. You could come in, and then what they had called pylons, and sometimes some of the pylons could lead you out of the land of the lost. But if you weren't really sure where you're going to go, it could be a short trip. Now the pylons instantly, if anybody's watching this, and the first season is so heavy with Star Trek connections, you immediately start thinking, the way they the time doors, as they called, it looks like the same time door on the City on the Edge of Forever. It flashes, then you can just jump into it. It's pretty much almost the same thing here. Though, there's absolutely no reference to Star Trek. I mean, there's no, hey, but you see it instantly. Especially with where we meet the antagonistic tribe in the land of the lost. Which, as soon as I saw it, I'm going like, oh, I've seen that before. Now I know where that came from. And that is in the second episode called The Sleestak God. And there is an episode of Star Trek where Kirk is put on a planet to fight for humanity's survival. A superior being puts him and a creature called the Gorn, and they have them fight against each other. And when Kirk shows his compassion in not killing the Gorn, he saves all of mankind, saves the Enterprise as well. The Gorn and the Sleestak could easily be one and the same. They could be one and the same. And seeing how David Gerrold was around Star Trek and actually wrote, and was credited with writing several treatments and a script, The Trouble with Tribbles, you could definitely see how he could have been influenced by the Sleestak into making them look like the Gorn. Now, they're never identified as the Gorn, but they are a hostile lizard race. They are just like the Gorn. The Gorn or lizard race has the same type of eyes, doesn't have the same kind of breathing. Very interesting. Very interesting. The third episode, this does get off to a heavy start. We see Rick trying to keep his two kids safe. The kids are being kids. They fight among themselves. They have to be very, very careful because anything they do wrong they could die. And it's stated in this series, in the seasons, that if you mess up, you will die. Now, you don't get that in kids shows, right? I can't. Yeah, I don't remember watching H&R Pufnstuf with that on, or Sigmund and the Sea Monster. But yes, if they make a mistake and if they're not careful around Grumpy, they could die. So we see that Holly tries to adopt a dinosaur as a pet, also as a working animal, because the Marshalls have to forage for food, and luckily for them, there's a lot of food there, but it's all immense. The food is like 3 times their size. They just can't pick it up and put it in a basket. A carrot could weigh as much as 100 pounds. Strawberries could weigh as much as 50 pounds. And so they have to push it on a buggy. But doing it manually is a pain in the ass. So they try to get a baby brontosaurus to do it, and with mixed results. And finally, Dopey can't be around the Marshalls is because he'll track Grumpy. Grumpy will always be there looking for the baby. So he has to go down to the marsh area where it's much safer. One of the big things about Land of the Lost, one of the things that's really impressive is the talent of the writing. Holy cow. Some of the writers for the first two seasons were just flat out amazing. David Gerrold, who I met, in Downstream is Larry Niven. We see the creation of probably the most important character outside of the Marshals. We see that being introduced in episode 6, The Stranger, which was written by Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov in the original series. He wrote a character called Enoch, which is vitally important to the Marshals, and it's very interesting as the series goes on. There's a lot of changes here that you'll see. Initially, Enoch he was one to try to help the Marshals, but at the same time he's trying to help his people, the Sleestack, evolve to where they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be as smart as him. So Enoch's trying to get home to warn them that they need to advance. What he doesn't know until later on is that his people were advanced, but they de-evolved through war, and so he is the bright light of his civilization. The rest of the sea stacks, they've devolved. That's they believe in gods. They they're trying to get the Marshals at any time they can. Um, and they're big, they're tall, they're strong. They're not very fast. They can only really act. They're only active at night. They don't like the heat. They don't really like the cold either. Too, they go into hibernation during extreme cold. So this is really interesting. Is the fact that there's so many great writers that are contributing to the series, including episode 6, The Strangers. Um, and he can send them home. He has a way to send them home, and this is a common theme in the first season: is that Wesley is very headstrong. He will not listen to reason, and he makes a lot of critical mistakes that could cost his family everything, or in this case, Enoch, because he just doesn't listen. He's so desperate to get home that he doesn't use his common sense. Now in this series, Holly is about 12 years old, and Will is about 16. He's about 16. Um, and we find out too. Also, we also find out that the Marshals are there's just the three of them because their mother had passed away. So this just so Rick is a widower. We find that out as well. Uh, there's some really strong episodes in the first season, including one called Album, where Holly has to get advice and help from a mysterious woman that comes through one of the time doors, and she helps Holly out, and Holly figures out her secret. Um, uh, uh, and as a Because what the Sleesacks have been trying to do is they've been trying to manipulate Holly through manipulation, through seeing figures coming through the time door. And so we see the character when we find out that the person that they've been trying to manipulate Holly with is the mom. Um, a lot of things have to do with the skylines, or the pylons, so they call them. And the pylons, there's some in the air and there's some in the dark and on the ground, and they control everything. They control time, weather, seasons. They can cause earthquakes. They can cause a lot of different things, drought. So the pylons and later on the skylines, they all have to be treated with respect. If you go in there and just start messing around with the crystals that they're running on, you could cause a lot of damage. And that does happen a couple of times in the first season where they tamper with forces they really shouldn't. Rick is doing that because he's experimenting. He's obviously the dad. He's pretty smart, and he's starting to pick up how the crystals work, and and he's still trying to stay friends with Enoch, and at this time in the series is still a ally. Doesn't always stay that way though. Interesting. Um, Not and Enoch is not the only Sleestak that the Marshals come up and are friends with. We have one where uh, uh, one called the Hole, where they keep on trying the Sleestak every time they capture one of the Marshals. They try to throw them down into a pit where there's a creature down there that supposedly, if the creature eats, it makes them happy. It's the god. It's the Sleestak god, and if they give them sacrifices, they'll leave them alone. During an encounter with one of the Sleestak, Rick and one called Slatch get thrown into the hole, and they must work together to get out and save each other's lives. Unfortunately, that is the last time we see Slatch. We don't see him again at all. So there's no, just when you think, maybe between Enoch and Slatch, they could build a small alliance. And because really you need an alliance on the land of the lost if you plan on surviving for very long at all. Um, and sometimes that doesn't always work out. The Bakuni, who Chaka is one of them, they're very prehistoric. They're very limited in how they communicate. Everything scares them. They're all covered with fur. They're very petty. They're just it's just they're almost like kids. They're like 3 or 4 year old. That's where their age development is at, even at the adults is 3 or 4 years old. Really, is that pretty much that right there? Um, and so when Holly just has a little bit of perfume and she puts it on, it causes a weird reaction among the Bakuni, and that gets them into a little bit of trouble too. Uh, So one of the most powerful episodes of the first season is one called "The Search," episode 11. This was written by Ben Bova. Ben Bova is a highly acclaimed science fiction writer. His books are out there, published for many fans are Ben Bova fans, including myself. And he wrote an episode that aired in November 1974. And Rick gets electrocuted by the crystals, and he is in desperate shape. And so Will tries to find Enoch to help save him because his advanced technology and knowledge. Um, but Enoch is so close to his own, going back to his own, and he also tells Will that, listen, I could get you home, and he brings up on one of the pylons, home. So Will could actually gone through the hole and went step back into his own world, but his Holly, his sister, and his dad are still back there, and Enoch cannot hold it for very long, and so Will has to make a choice. It's powerful for it's life and death. It's life and death. You can live for sure, or you're probably gonna face a certain death here in the land of the lost. Pretty heavy stuff for a kid show, right? Um, David Gerrold wrote a lot of episodes. He also wrote the episode following that called "The Possession," um, and that's a battle for one of the pylons. We also see some of the dinosaurs too. They don't always survive. We do see that Grumpy, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, he does kill several of the dinosaurs that the family has become fond of, including one called Spot, that lived down in the marsh, and we see Spot get killed on camera. It's like yikes. So that's a little tough. Um, and then they find out that dinosaurs also have a weakness to what they called dinosaur nip. I didn't make that up. And that causes Grumpy to be that causes Grumpy to chase after him, including going after them over a bridge that he normally would never cross because he's a deep chasm, and the dinosaur is smart enough to know that he's not really that he's afraid of the chasm, but with the nip he chases them, and then and that causes the Marshall family to throw the nip over the cliff and hope that Grumpy will go after it, but he doesn't. But they do find a mysterious diary that holds clue to a possible escape from the land of the lost. So there could be some hope there. And so they follow this diary. It's in a voice of an English voice, and they talk about how they've been stuck there for a while, but now it looks like they're going to be able to go home, and they found a way out, and the marshals follow the diary. They follow the diary to get up another part, and they find out that the two people that were trapped in there, they never made it out. They were trapped in the Sleekstack caves, and they starved to death, and their skeletons are there. Kid show, right? Uh, and that was really powerful too. That was written by Dick Morgan, who was a TV writer, acclaimed TV writer, and he wrote that. We also find DC Fontana, who is also huge in Star Trek. Um, so so then again, Holly is runs into her doppelganger a second time, and it's a lady named Rainey who at Enoch's cave, who helps her overcome her fears. Well, we already met in an earlier episode. The Sleestack tried to trick the Marshals into believing that their mom had come back. Was in fact this episode. That's exactly who does come back, and comes back. It's Holly. It's Holly comes back. Holly comes back. It's Holly's grown up. All right. Um, Two more episodes. This ran for 17 episodes for the first season, which is pretty much was really unusual. Most of the TV episodes for live action during the 70s ran for 13 episodes because of the cost. So, like shows like Shazam or ISIS or The Love Bug, they always pretty much ran like 13 episodes. Now, H&R Pufnstuf, I think, ran for 2 years for two different seasons, 1 8 and 1 9 episodes, but everything else was about 13. Makes them cult status, right? Uh, the one story that was written, the last two stories were written with by Larry Niven and David Gerrold, including the last one called Circle. Now, Circle is a mind blowing story, and this concludes the first season, Atlanta the Lost. So the Marshals find out from their friend Enoch, who has not been able to go home, and he's frustrated. Enoch is frustrated, and he wants to go home, but he can't, and it might be all the Marshals' fault. And so they investigate it, and they figure out basically what happens is that that in order for Enoch to have a chance to go back, however many people come into the land has to leave at the same time. And the marshals see themselves on the time slip, on the time door, and they realize one thing. They realize that they all died. 1,000 feet. They fell 1,000 feet. How would you not die? And that's really what happened. They fell over and over and over. In order to break that, to save them, to save that family, and allow Enoch to be able to go home, the marshals that we've been following, they have to go home. But the marshals that we're seeing on the screen that keep repeating themselves, falling over and over and over, they get to go home, but the other family comes back in. It's like they never left, but they did. So the people that we see this season, they escape to go home, but in order for that to happen, the one that's caught in the causality, the time loop, they have to come in. And so the Marshall family that we see from now on is not the family that we saw in the first season. It's another version of the same family. Now that's a really mind-blowing thing. That's a real mind-blowing. It's just trying to explain that to a 10-year-old. I want to mention too the episode before that was Hurricane, and that includes finding another Earth astronaut. And this is one thing I really did appreciate about the series, because it would have been so easy to do this. and that is they did not keep introducing characters like the character of the week, like Gilligan's Island did. You know, they're trapped on the island, but had all these different people come to the island throughout the whole series, and you're like, sooner or later, someone's going to be able to help these guys get off this island. Well, they didn't fall into that trap. Only people that came in, one was a Civil War a gentleman who ended up dying. We only saw him once, but he knew that he was going to last for very long. Of course, the two Englishmen that were beforehand that rode out Beware Sleestack, and they died. Then we see a astronaut come through the land of the lost, and they can figure out they can send him home. They can send him back to his time. What's really interesting about that too is that there was a curse word that was used, that was uttered in this episode. Ron Masic's character says the word "damn." Now that was really, I had to go back and replay that because I'm like, did he really just say that? And he did. He certainly did. And then when Rick was reading the two gentlemen who looked like they were going to get out, and one of the men before he dies, in his diary, he left. I don't know if I'm going to heaven. I don't know if I'm going to hell. Kid show. This is not a kid show. This is a adult show, definitely teens. It was really, really good, real good. I was blown away with how good this really was. And so it got approved for a second season, and we will definitely come back and revisit that for next week's Dollar Theater. But for this one here, we're gonna get out of here so I can upload this. But